Real estate is a tough business. It can be a long and complicated journey involving contractors, agents, inspectors, lenders, and appraisers. The appraiser is the valuation expert and determines value in real estate. Yet most in the industry don't know much about the appraisal process, and we want to change that.
I'm John Sledge, a retired real estate appraiser turned investor. My wife Kalen and I started this podcast to share insights into analyzing real estate through the eyes of an appraiser, and to share stories to help you avoid costly mistakes on your real estate journey. This is the Think Like an Appraiser podcast, Cautionary Tales in Real Estate.
This is episode number 19 of the Think Like an Appraiser podcast, Cautionary Tales in Real Estate. And today, John and I are going to talk about 5 common mistakes that we see real estate investors make because they are not thinking like an appraiser. Maybe they don't even know how to think like an appraiser.
Right. One of the things we've noticed is we meet with people and we train people and we're out talking to real estate investors and real estate agents is the one thing that is missing is thinking like an appraiser. The one thing in their business that can cure a lot of the problems they have is thinking like an appraiser.
Well, it's the one thing that is missing, because if home value is determined by the appraiser, then the people out there that are trying to achieve a higher home value need to know what the appraiser is looking for.
Right, and that's what we do. After my 15 years of appraisal experience, and now that I've retired, we teach how to think like an appraiser, and nobody else is doing that.
Well, no one else is doing that because the active appraisers cannot share valuation with anyone, because that would be considered an official appraisal.
Anytime they share their opinion of value, it is considered an appraisal, whether it's verbal, written, it's all the same.
And that's one of the reasons why there's not a lot of information out there about how appraisers determine value. It's not talked about.
Well, because they can't.
Appraisers don't talk about it.
Nope, they're focused on doing their job, and they cannot have that conflict of interest because it will cause them problems with the regulation boards.
So that's where we can help you. So if you're interested in learning how to think like an appraiser, follow us, listen to our podcast, share our podcast, and join us at Think Like an Appraiser.
Exactly.
We can be what's missing from your real estate business that can take you to the next level.
It can make you more profitable, it can make you more successful, and it can make your life easier.
Yes, and give you more confidence in the decisions that you make.
Exactly. Which brought us on the topic for today's podcast, which is 5 common mistakes that we see investors make.
Yeah, so let's start with those.
Okay.
So one thing that we've noticed when we talk with real estate investors is they talk a lot about finding the deal. And they spend a lot of time looking for the deal.
Right.
Which is a very important part of this business.
It is.
You've got to find a good deal. But what they don't do is they don't talk a lot about what happens after they find the deal.
I get calls all the time, and the first question they ask is, how do I find a good deal? Well, there are lots of ways to do that, but the focus and where you become the most profitable is what you do when you find that deal, how you plan your renovations, your after repaired value, how you determine all that is what's going to make you successful. Yeah, you make money on the buy, but you make the most money when you plan out your project based on your comparable sales.
It makes me think of an engaged couple that they're engaged for a year, a couple of years, and they spend all of that time talking about and planning the wedding day itself. And they spend very little time talking about life after the wedding.
Which, what a great analogy. Yeah, they're planning one day out of 50 years.
Right. So just like with the home, they're focused on the buy and they get that house bought. But then I think a lot of people are lost and they don't know what to do after that point.
Which is what leads to
other problems. Other mistakes.
Exactly.
Exactly right.
So let's talk about the second common mistake that we run across, and we've spoke of this, is investors and agents look at comparable sales instead of analyzing them because they don't know the specifics of what to look for.
Right, because if you don't know what the appraiser's going to be looking at, what good does it really do you to look at the comparable sales? Because the ultimate goal is to get a higher valuation.
Correct.
So you need to know the specifics the appraiser is going to be looking at so that you can look at the same things. You need to be on the same page as the appraiser because the appraiser is the one who determines the value.
Exactly. Whether you are doing a flip and going to sell this property, or if you're going to keep it as a buy and hold as a rental property and you want to burn it later, you have to get the highest value. That's what this game is all about. And it's all about thinking like an appraiser and analyzing your comparable sales as they would so that you can determine what the highest value you can get for the property is.
Exactly. That's exactly right. All right, let's talk about a third mistake that we see people make, and that is that they determine after repaired value based on general knowledge of the neighborhood without determining the scope of work that it's going to take to attain that after repaired value.
I think this is one of the most common mistakes. As people talk about after repaired value or ARV, I hear all the time that renovated homes in this neighborhood sell for blank dollars per square foot. Well, there is no blanket statement of a renovated home selling for whatever it sells for, because a renovated home could be a home with new paint and granite countertops, or it could be a home that is completely renovated where each room has been totally updated, and they just don't compare. So you have to understand what the scope of work is before you can find the comparable sales that you will compete with.
As investors, we rely on our real estate agents, we rely on our wholesalers. But if you're not doing your own research, the information that the real estate agent and the wholesaler are going to give it's general information.
It is.
So someone cannot determine the ARV of a home without understanding the specific scope of work that's being done to that home.
Right, because the wholesaler, their job is to sell this property, and they're going to give you a general ARV based on general renovated homes in the neighborhood. But what you have to do is determine what your scope of work is so that you can find exact homes or homes that you can compete with on the high end of the market so that you can make the most money on this deal.
So I think the scope of work is overlooked all the time in determining the ARV.
Right.
Because the scope of work does determine the ARV. So you have to determine the scope of work before determining the ARV.
Exactly. Which leads us to the next mistake is the renovation plan is not based on comparable sales data.
Right. That's the mistake they make. They don't make a detailed plan based on the comparable sales. They're coming in again with a general idea. I'm going to renovate this home.
Right. And everybody has their own opinion on what renovated is.
Exactly.
It's where the appraiser, he or she will go out and do their site visit, and they'll look at every room in the house. They'll look at the exterior. They're going to look at every piece of it and make notes and take photographs to ensure that they're finding the best sales to compare this home to. That's what a comparable sale means. You're looking for a home that is similar size, similar layout, similar renovations. It has each room, and then this appraiser is going to go in and make adjustments for things that aren't similar. So if you want to compete at the highest level, then you have to determine your renovation plan and your scope of work on the comparable sales in that neighborhood.
And this really makes the job of creating a renovation plan so much easier.
It does.
Because the comparable sales will tell you exactly what you need to do.
Right. Because the two biggest mistakes in that arena are, one, you don't do enough renovations to compete on that high end. But the second mistake that is made is a lot of people complete renovations that aren't required in that neighborhood. So therefore, you're spending more money that you're not going to get back out on the back end.
Yeah, that's a good point. The last mistake we're going to talk about today is people-based decisions. They make decisions based on emotion. That is not a good idea.
No, you need to let your research and that data that you find drive your decisions. One, drive the decisions on your scope of work before you make your plan. But the next problem is every renovation is going to have a problem. You're going to find something that you didn't plan for as you are going through the project. What you have to do is you have to take your plan and make a detailed plan so that when bad things happen, you can go and look at the data that you have to make the decision on how the best way to move forward is.
And getting into real estate investing is a scary thing to do because it's a big investment. You make a mistake and it can cost you a lot of money. And so it's real easy to let your emotions take over when something unexpected happens. But that's where, when you think like an appraiser, emotions don't come into play.
Not at all.
And we can help you take the emotion out of it and refer to your research and refer to your data to continue making decisions that are smart to get you through the project. That's what we can do. That's how we can help you.
It is, because if you take your project and you think like an appraiser, then you're going to have a more detailed plan. You're going to have a more detailed budget. You're going to include contingency funds in your budget to help with these repairs. But what you can do is when you go back to make these decisions, rather than making a decision, because I think the biggest thing that happens when people make these decisions based on emotion is they cut corners to finish. Oh, crud, I have to fix this, and therefore I've only got $5,000 less to finish up the project.
And that's what gives this part of the business a bad reputation.
Right.
Are people who get into trouble, they run out of money, they cut corners
to get through, because they got to get it back on the market.
Right.
Because like we talked about earlier, it is every day is costing you money, so you have to finish in a timely fashion. And people cut corners, and the product they put out is not the product they intended to. And so that's going to affect them at the time of the appraisal, because the appraiser is going to look at it in detailed fashion, just like you did when you were making your plan. And so if you don't have all the renovations done, you're not able to compete on that higher level. So you have to be able to determine, how do I complete the scope of work, but where can I save some money to finish out but still get the level home completed that we started out with.
And it sure is helpful to have someone to talk these sort of things through with, which is what we do at Think Like an Appraiser.
Right, because if you're a member on our platform, you can reach out in the forum and say, I have a problem. Here's where I'm at. What's your opinion?
Well,
or ask a question.
We also have live events that they can attend and ask questions, our live Q&As.
We have live Q&As. We have workshops where we work through these things with you. And if you have a specific problem, you can bring it and we can work it through, or a specific deal, we can look at it. And all of these things are part of our platform.
Right. And so if you're tired of spending all your time looking for the deal and then panicking because you don't know what to do afterwards, or you're really not understanding how to analyze comparable sales, or you realize, oh, yes, to determine an accurate ARV, I need to first determine a scope of work, which needs to be based on my comparable sales so that I can have a detailed renovation plan. And I don't want to make any more decisions based on emotions. If that's you, then go to Think Like an Appraiser.
It is a place where you can ask questions, and it's a safe place where we're there to help. And we're there to help you think like an appraiser, because that's the missing link.
It is the missing piece. It's the missing piece in investing in real estate. And it's so obvious. It's really just, if you want to achieve a higher valuation in this game, you need to know how that higher valuation is going to be determined. It's as simple as that.
And it's simple as thinking like an appraiser. So come to thinklikeanappraiser.com and join us. Keep listening to our podcast. Share it with your friends, because that's why we do what we do.
Well, congratulations. You made it to the end of our podcast. Did you know that only 5% of podcast listeners make it to the end of an episode? When I found that statistic out, I was really surprised. But it shows you have a high level of commitment, and we need people like you spreading our message, which is the key to success in real estate is through research and due diligence. And that's what our podcast is about. Sharing stories about mistakes made is part of a research process.
It is. So we need your help. We couldn't do this without you. We need you to like and share our podcast, and make sure you subscribe because you don't want to miss an episode. Also, if you'd rate the podcast, that lets other people know how much value you're getting from our show.
And because you're helping us, we promise to continue to provide quality content for our listeners. We want to help you continue to grow your real estate business. And right now on our website, thinklikeanappraiser.com, you can find 75 due diligence questions to ask. It's a free download. So get your copy today at thinklikeanappraiser.com.